Hello and welcome to the Read to Know podcast, where the goal is to actually remember what you read so then you can better apply it to your life. On this podcast, we go through a book one chapter at a time, and then we actually practice remembering what we've read. So if you want to follow along, we're currently working our way through Bob Goff's book, Dream Big. I'm Zach Brown, and my friend Chris Yarber is joining me to help discuss and break down this book. Also, if you're on Apple Podcasts, it would be huge if you left a rating and review for us. It would help out a ton. If you're not on Apple Podcasts, no worries. Just send this to a friend who might be interested. Anyway, thanks again for listening and enjoy the conversation. So to begin here, let's start out with another what's in your cup. It's like, again, you don't have anything.
Mine is nothing.
Right, you don't even have water.
No.
See, I have to have something because my mouth gets dry and I need something to drink.
Yeah.
So right now I have coffee though,
Yes.
but I'm gonna chase it down with a lime bubbly sparkling water.
There you go.
So this coffee is the beans are from Peru.
Okay.
And I got the bag from Cafe Campesino, which if you're...
You did not go to Peru to get the beans.
No, I did not.
Yes.
No. If you're local to Americus, you will know Cafe Campesino. Got their beans from there. It's a great coffee. One of my favorites.
It is good.
I've been getting that a lot over
is
this
that with
quarantine.
the chocolatey? Is that the one with the chocolatey hint to it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
A little bit. I think they might have some others that might have that kind of similar taste.
Okay. Yeah, and all their coffees are from a place. The names of their coffees are from wherever the bean is from, right?
Right.
Peru, Mexico, different things like that. Yeah.
Yep. And that's another thing, actually. I've gotten into coffee a lot more, specifically brewing at home since this whole quarantine and stuff broke out. A couple days ago or the other day, I was talking about how I've gotten into sparkling water. Mm-hmm. I've also gotten into brewing coffee at home. I've been drinking coffee for a few years now, but I haven't brewed my own coffee at home much until this quarantine. So I've gotten into that. So I brewed this cup on my AeroPress, and
It is good. Yeah, AeroPress is a lot better than just making a Folgers at home. But I love that you're just about to chase that down with the sparkling water, which, as I think we've discussed before, I'm not a huge fan of sparkling water, just not my thing. But I enjoy a good Diet Coke. I enjoy some good aspartame every once in a while. So, yeah, I need that fix.
Yep. So, moving on to what we actually came here to talk about, which is Chapter 8 of Bob Goff's book, Dream Big. This chapter is called Getting to the New Part. The subtitle is Doesn't Matter Who You Were, God Cares About Who You Are Becoming. And if I could sum up this chapter in one word, I think that would be change.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. Getting to the new part, really, he's challenging us in this chapter to become something, to become new, to embrace new and change, even when it comes to small changes. Of course, on our way to chasing our dreams and chasing our ambitions, we're going to have to make changes and shifts. Some of them are going to be big. Some of them are going to be small. But I think that that's a good habit to get in. When a change comes your way in your life, to embrace it, to celebrate it, especially if it's in the purposeful direction that you have yourself heading. If you do get in the habit of embracing and accepting those little changes, then the big ones will become a lot easier for us to accept. Because I know for myself, change can sometimes be really inconvenient, especially if it's at a time that I don't expect, but it may be the best time to make a change on our way forward, pushing forward in our life. Then that's what has to happen. And as we accept that more and more, we get better at it, and we can become the new people that we need to be to really chase our dreams. And I think that Bob had some of those moments in his life as he breaks down in this chapter and in other chapters as well, as he tells these amazing stories that he does.
Right.
So,
yep. Of course, again, if you're reading along, you'll understand these stories because he can tell them better than we can. But I like some of the overarching kind of themes of this chapter, especially when he's talking about change. He's not just talking about, I think, changing, your mindset, changing your, this or that or whatever.
Right. But he's kind of covered that already.
Right. It's kind of like an idea of, life's going to have seasons and life's going to change. and your ambitions and what you do should flow with it.
Right.
You know, like there's this constant evolution of ourselves in a sense, and our ambitions ebb and flow with that as well. For example, you know, he talks about how he was a lawyer for, you know, years.
Yeah, which
And
after seeing interviews and talks with him, you would never think that he was a lawyer. I mean, I would love to see him in a courtroom work because I just can't. It's just kind of hard to picture
Right.
sometimes. But he says
wouldn't
that
it be great to be a juror if Bob Goff was the lawyer?
I
in
know,
that
you know how
situation?
accepted you would feel, because he said, you know, I can take a bar exam like some people take a blood test. You know, he can just do it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's amazing. But yeah, so he was a lawyer at one time.
Yeah, he was a lawyer for years, and he was good at it, and he enjoyed it. And I think that's the interesting thing is he makes this point here that just because you're good at something and just because you enjoy it even doesn't necessarily mean it's what you have to do.
Right.
And I think oftentimes when we get stuck in ruts, it's because we got stuck in a habit of just doing things that we're good at.
Right.
And that is just in our wheelhouse. And one, we're not stretching ourselves. Two, I think we just kind of get comfortable. And that's why, you know, we're meant for change and we should embrace it. And in his example, he was a lawyer and he enjoyed that and that was good. But then other things started coming up that he was more interested in.
Yeah.
And in chasing those things, being a lawyer started to become less and less of a priority.
To the point to where he literally handed his keys off to someone else, his own law firm. He had his own firm and said, "You owe me nothing for the law firm. You take it over. I'm going to go and do this." And so he leveraged what he was good at. He leveraged an ambition that he had maybe in his 20s, and to take him to the next step. And that's a big change that was new for him. And that journey along the way changed him, which he talks about earlier
Right.
in the book. But like you said, I think that's so powerful that just because you're good at something doesn't mean that's what you have to do. I'm so thankful that I realized that in college, because for all of my life I thought that music was my classical music, because you know me, I played low brass instruments starting in middle school and still do now. But that's really about the only thing that I was good at. Not an athletics guy, just music was what I was good at. And so that's what I thought I had to do. But if you're able to tell yourself, okay, and give yourself permission in a sense, you don't have to do what you're good at. That doesn't have to be what you have to be stuck in.
Right.
You can do something necessarily that that stretches you and molds you, like you said, that may not become as natural, but you find so much more joy and purpose in it than you would in those things that you're good at. So.
Right. And that's the great thing about life. You know, I mean, we're not stuck in boxes.
Right.
You know, the only boxes that we're stuck in is the ones that we made for ourselves, basically. And that's what he's saying here. And going back and looking at that situation, like he just quit his own firm that he started. And we just he makes a joke out of it in the book. But seriously, if you think about that, if there's anyone who has started a business, you know, that's basically like your baby.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And he was making good money too.
Yeah.
So financially, everyone else is looking at him thinking, "What in the world are you
Right.
doing, making this kind of change?"
Right. But even giving up your own business,
Yeah.
just being like done, never going back there again, you know, that's a big pivot, and that's a big conviction, you know, and that's a big change. I think a couple key takeaways from this story, this analogy. I think it's interesting that also first, before he did that though, he still leveraged the skill, that the thing he was good at first, before he completely cold turkey dropped it and moved on with what he was doing in Uganda, starting schools, helping kids over there in Uganda. He was actually using his skills as a lawyer. And it actually was very beneficial. I think he goes into more detail in Love Does or Everybody Always, maybe both of those. He talks about it more. But he was able to use those skills in this new thing that he was working on. And so you can use skills that you already have in new areas, new ambitions, and new challenges that you take on.
Right.
And then the second thing is that just because, you know, something was a passion at one point in your life doesn't mean that it always has to be.
Right.
And just because you do something at one point in your life doesn't mean you always have to do it.
Right.
And he makes the distinction here between being capable of something and being made for something.
Yeah.
And he was capable of being a lawyer. He wasn't necessarily made to be a lawyer, though.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that he wants us to think about here when it comes to change.
Right. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Really, even if, and I feel like he doesn't say this, but I get a sense that he would say yes to this. Is that for some people reading this book, you may be living your dream right now, and I would think for most of my life personally, that for most of mine, I mean the stage that I'm at in my life right now has been an ambition of mine. I'm kind of living in this and enjoying this right now. But at the same time, even though you may be living in an ambition, in your life right now, again, we have to be willing to, in the future, and we recognize this now and get used to this now and see where our life takes us. We have to be willing to make those changes to accept that new, because although we may be living in a dream right now, in an ambition right now, that may change as our life goes, and so let's be willing to change and accept that and move forward.
Yeah, it's, as he mentions, it's a continual evolution kind of ourselves and of our passions and desires, and what we are kind of continually walking in what we were made to do and figuring that out one step at a time and then walking in it.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm ready to open up the book and get
let's
into
pull it
some
out.
specifics. So you said one. I wish I could repeat it exactly like you said it, which I think I remember now. You said, that there's a difference between what we're doing and what we're made to do.
Capable of, made to do.
And made to do. For Bob Goff, he starts off the chapter and says that even if God is no big deal to you, because what he tries to communicate is what he believes is that what you're made to do, God has made you to do it. And even if God is no big deal to you, he says your life is a big deal to him. And he says that pursuing your ambitions needs to start from a position of acceptance and not compliance. Mm-hmm. And then I love this next part just to set us up. He says compliance only lasts until you decide you're not going to comply anymore. That we won't be able to get to the best parts of our lives and faith without accessing the best parts of acceptance. So I thought that was a beautiful start to this chapter.
Right. He also continues kind of that same thought here. And, you mentioned capability. He says, you're also capable of being both a jerk and a relational genius.
Yeah, I love that.
And you also have a measurable untapped potential. Mm-hmm. But basically what he says is, let's try to be a little bit less of a jerk and a little bit more of of the other thing.
Right. And he even talks about, accepting yourself in a mm-hmm. sense, that the fix is he says the fix is easy. Give yourself a hug or two on this journey. And I love how he writes that even if you're not a hugger, do it anyway. So I love those little pithy kind of statements that he throws in there. But then he moves on to this next section, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Where he talks about this idea of motivation of either love or fear, is what he throws in there. And so he says it's fear that stops love in its tracks every single time. And he says most of what we do is motivated by either love or fear. And the trick is to figure out which one is doing the talking, he says. Mm-hmm. And hopefully it's not fear. Hopefully it is love that's motivating and pushing us. Because I think in his mind he's thinking, it's love that's going to push us towards that change and that new that we need, that purpose that we're seeking. Because then he continues and I love this line. He says that some of the ideas holding us back didn't actually originate with us.
And that kind of refers back to the scripting that we would talk about in 7 Habits, that oftentimes we have scripts that other people gives us, whether we're looking for it or not.
Yes. Yeah, right. And he says this, if you want to get serious about finding or reactivating ambitions, it will require taking a purposeful pause from your usual activities to understand why you do what you do. Mm-hmm. So in order to make the change necessary, the reason why I think he brings in this section of fear versus love is so that we can reflect and understand why we do what we do, because
Right.
the why behind what we do is very, very important.
Right.
And it's either going to continue to push us forward, or it's really going to drag us behind.
Right.
So,
and I think the if you trace that back and you do figure out what was behind it, I think oftentimes probably is that the fear is what keeps you from that change, and then the love is what pushes you towards that change.
right.
In furthering your ambitions, evolving, moving forward, and maybe dropping off some old things that you used to
Right.
make room for.
Right. Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But he gets into, in these last couple pages, as of course every chapter in this book is a little shorter, he touches a little bit more specifically on this aspect of change and new. And he says, what I'm trying to get at is this, is that God endowed each of us with something unique. And you mentioned this at the beginning, that there is a difference between what we are doing and what we were made to do, what we're good at, and what we're good at is not necessarily what we have to do. And since he says here that God endowed each of us with something unique, we need to find out what that uniqueness is. What we really crush, and then live that out.
Right. He says the trick is to get it into play.
Right.
And I like that, into play, because it doesn't mean the trick is not to do that and do that all the time.
Right.
But it's to get it into play. How are you going to use it effectively?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the key thing, because oftentimes I think we hear a lot nowadays. We hear a lot of, what is the thing you're good at and you really like, and then just do that 24/7 and nothing else.
Right.
But that's not what he's saying here. He's saying, how can you use it effectively in any capacity, in
Yes.
whatever capacity may be most needed at that time in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a different thought than I think what you hear often.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, that was good.
And he says here, it's easy to let our capabilities decide who we'll be, right? What you're good at, you're like, well, I guess that's what I'm doing because that's what I'm good at, and not diverting from that, even if you have desires to do so.
Right.
He continues also, he says there, he doesn't think that we should let our capabilities, our careers, or our successes even decide our future. Just because you had success in one area in life in the past doesn't mean that you should continue down that road if that's not where your heart is.
Right.
Just because you've had success doesn't mean you should just continue and chase that success down for more success.
Right. He does say, though, since you're on the topic of success, he does say that if you're not finding newer and bigger, which I found this part encouraging, because as you read this book, I've thought to myself several times, maybe I haven't spent a lot of my life dreaming and thinking big enough. But he says if you're not finding newer and bigger, more beautiful ambitions, you probably don't need to get smarter, which is encouraging.
Yeah.
What you need to get newer, which he says this means you need to change a couple things as you evolve. You don't necessarily need to ditch the past altogether, and that's where he gets into his trip with him becoming a lawyer and the connection with Uganda and planning the schools and stuff. He doesn't say that you necessarily need to neglect the past altogether. It doesn't mean that everything that you've done so far is worthless. That sometimes the capabilities we have developed will help serve towards those new ambitions.
Right.
So that's
for
encouraging.
Sure. For sure. And our desires and interests can and should change and be revised along the way. He continues, if everything stays the same, we never get to the new part.
Right.
So, we can't let everything stay the same, and we should reach for change. We should embrace it, be excited for it.
Yes.
He says we can't be the new version of us if we're stuck being an old version, and we're going to need to change some things that have worked in our past in order to make way for our future. And so that's just an interesting point. We're not cutting away the bad necessarily. It's even talking about cutting away some of the good things, but just that season is over, or that time for that thing, that activity, or that job has run its course. And so some things, and I think that's true about everything, has a time limit on it. Everything has, an expiration date in life,
Right.
and at some point, it's time to move on. And that's what he's talking about here
Right.
in this chapter.
Right.
Which is a hard thing because it's not like change, stop doing something bad and start doing something good. It's not that. It's talking about, you might have done something good, you might have done something great, but is it what you should be doing now and continue to do now?
Yeah, it's really easy for us to identify, good, bad versus good necessarily, but really what he's talking about here is the good versus the better or the best, or even sometimes the better versus the best. He ends this chapter with this line that I love that says, "If we're limited to merely operating within our old capabilities, we'll never get to the new creation or ambitions our ambitions are guiding us towards." So we need to push. That needs to be our anthem as he ends this chapter, is this new creation. That kind of
Right.
needs to be our anthem to move past some of the old.
Right, because he says the sentence before that, he basically says that the good and he said the affirmation that we may get from doing those good things may keep us in that complacency bubble. You know what I mean? Because and that's true. Like if you keep getting affirmation, positive feedback from doing this, well, you could at least say, if I do this, I get good results and people like it, and I'm confident that if I do this, everything will work out fine.
Yeah.
But that's not, we're not going for, I think everything will work out fine, and it's, that's the safe bet.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about here when it comes to dream big. We're not talking about the safe bet.
Yeah.
And that's what he's talking about, moving past just the safe bet and moving towards something a little bit more ambitious than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that pretty much does it for this chapter, getting to the new part. Tomorrow we're talking about chapter 9, sleepwalking. And I also wanted to mention here at the very end, closing, before we wrap up, if you guys have been, those of you listening and following along, if you've enjoyed this so far and you have some thoughts as well with any of these chapters, please reach out to us, hit us up at Read to Know Pod on pretty much all Instagram, Facebook, anywhere. Send us a message, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you guys on what you think so far about this book. And if you have any specific thoughts on any of the chapters, let us know.
Yeah, and we would love to share those in an episode as well. So if you, whether you're reading with us, or maybe you get ahead a little bit and share some thoughts on some future chapters, we'll pull those up and say, hey, this is what so and so thought, and discuss that and have a good time discussing that. So we definitely want to hear what you have to say.
Yep, reach out to us at Read to Know Pod and email readtoknowpod@gmail.com. Thanks guys for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.